Thank you for allowing us to go through the process and get to this. It was worth it, and we are going to serve you well.
We don't speak for the president-elect. We simply respond when we're asked questions about what we're going to do. The message, and one that I feel very strongly about, is that there is a constitutional separation. The Founding Fathers did that for a reason.
Hello, welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Leanne Caldwell, anchor of Washington Post Live and also co-author of the Early Brief Morning newsletter. Today, I am joined by Senator Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota. Senator Rounds, thanks so much for joining us today.
Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you.
Always an interesting conversation when we chat, and there's so much news to get to. We're both to explain my background here, we're both in the Capitol complex, just different parts. So thanks for joining us online. I want to start with all of the president's nominees that are walking the halls of Congress, meeting with senators like yourself. I want to start with one nominee who you have met with, and that is Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democratic representative from Hawaii, who is Trump's pick to be the Director of National Intelligence. You met with her recently, and what was your position on the meeting? What did you think?
She's pretty bright. We had a good discussion. She comes from a background in the House of Representatives, and she's a veteran, and she carries that with her. And part of the message that she was trying to convey to us is that's going to shape the way that she looks at intel, is from the basis of what she learned as a veteran, and the fact that she served in the House of Representatives, and the types of information that they received kind of helped shape the direction that she wants to go. So I thought it was a really good meeting, had a very frank discussion. And part of what we do is to provide advice. And so we talked about how to work our way through the open hearings, as well as a chance to visit with her personally beforehand. And I thought it was a really good meeting.
She talked, as you said, about intelligence, which is going to be a central part of her job as Director of National Intelligence. She has expressed open skepticism of American intelligence. What did she say about that?
Well, I think part of it is where does she get her information? What type of access did she have beforehand in the House? The information that she comes across both in person when she would go overseas and so forth, based on, and then comparing that with what she had received when she was in the House of Representatives. But it's okay to have somebody walk on in and just simply say, look, I'm going to be questioning. I want to make sure that the information we're getting out to the president is the right kind of information. And so this is one of those areas where sometimes a breath of fresh air can be a good thing. So I think the most important part of this is that she has a real desire to serve the president. She has a real desire to try to help the president work through what he wants to get done. At the same time, we had a pretty frank conversation here about how to make everything work in these open hearings. Remember, what we get to do in private with our meetings is to kind of set the stage for what they can expect when they go into an open hearing or a public hearing. We just want to make sure that each of these nominees, and I do this with all of my nominees, we talk about what they're going to see from our Democrat colleagues as they ask questions, the types of information they're going to want to get from these nominees, and what they can do to prepare themselves to be in the best possible position to answer those, to kind of get an advance notice about what they're going to face in that open hearing. And we've done that for years. We continue to do it.
So did she have an answer for her meeting several years ago with Bashar al-Assad, the now former dictator of Syria, and also the skepticism she's expressed and the sympathy she's expressed for, I should say, Russian President Vladimir Putin.
You know what I shared with her was I believe that members of the Senate, members of the House, representatives have every opportunity to meet with foreign dignitaries. And when they do that, they simply have to go in with their eyes wide open, knowing that they're going to get a point of view from, from their country's point of view and their perspective. And I happen to know that some of my close colleagues here meet with people from other parts of the world on a regular basis. And just because they meet with them doesn't mean that they are going to expound or to talk publicly about the meetings in terms of changing our point of view. But it's good to hear the perspective of either our adversaries or of people that maybe are critical of the United States. It doesn't mean that it's going to change our view, but it's good to have that understanding. I think it can help us to do our job better. So I'm really not one of the critics of her decision to go and meet with these folks. And I told her that. I said, look, it doesn't bother me that you went and met with those folks. In fact, Jim Inhofe, who was one of my mentors, actually met with some folks that people would be surprised to learn that he had met with them, but he did it in the spirit of learning from them and helping to influence them. And so when Tulsi came in and she said, and I told her, I said, I know that you've had some criticism on that. You're not going to get that criticism from me because I don't think there's anything wrong with going and meeting with them. The question
Yeah.
is, what do you do with the information that you get? And are
Mhm.
you able to look at it, discern it, and then to be able to come back and say, okay, this is the reason why they're acting in this particular way, but it helps us to form our perspective about how to deal with them in the future.
Yeah. Another nominee, or excuse me, choice, not yet a nominee because Donald Trump is not yet president, but Pete Hegseth to lead the Department of Defense. As we all know, there are accusations against him about sexual misconduct, about mismanagement of organizations, and of excessive drinking. Do you have any concerns? And should the person who has allegations against him for sexual misconduct, who is under a non disclosure agreement, be able to come forward and speak?
Well, first, I did not talk to him, or he did not tell me whether or not he would release them from that. I had heard through other sources that that was a possibility. I can't confirm that. I don't know. Our discussion was based, first of all, and I broke it down into two segments when I talked to Pete. I had not met him before. I wanted to know what his focus would be if he's going to lead the Department of Defense. He wants to make them lethal again, is the way that he put it. And I think that was a good starting message. He said he wanted our adversaries to know that we were a lethal fighting force, and that was what our focus was. And as you know, among many of us, we have a real concern with DEI and the amount of time that was taken to talk about DEI issues within the Department of Defense, and whether or not that had taken away from the department's focus on being lethal and training our people to survive in battle. Pete comes back into this as a veteran and as a person who's been overseas, and in sharing with the president the same vision that this focus be on bringing back lethality. The other piece that we talked about was my real interest in making sure that the Department of Defense understood the need and would focus on getting the strategic weapon systems and information systems that would make sure that our young men and women that go into combat would never enter a fair fight. And as I shared with him, I've never served in the military, but as governor of South Dakota, I went to literally dozens of deployment ceremonies and welcome home ceremonies, and I went to 31 funerals. And they change you. And the one
Yeah.
thing that I committed myself was that every time I got someone from the Department of Defense in front of me, was what are we doing to make darn sure that our young men and women have everything they need? And that's what I'm committed to do. And I want to make sure that these folks coming in clearly understand their responsibility to make sure that every weapon system that we need, every bit of information, every management system, every tool we've got is focused on getting these young kids, these young people, these young men and women that have to go into harm's way, getting them out as quickly as possible. And that's what it sounds like they want to do. And besides that, the other focus here is he wants to stay out of war in the first place. That means making damn sure that our adversaries recognize us as being the premier fighting force in the world. And peace
Mhm.
through strength, which is a Ronald Reagan technique and messaging, is one that they clearly believe in this administration coming forward. And Pete made that very clear to me. So number one, and I know this is a long answer, but on that answer, I have no problems at all with the second piece, which is the allegations that have been made. They have been allegations made, but they have been anonymously made to the best of my knowledge so far. And
Yeah.
I told him that this is where there's going to be a focus in the open hearing. And this is where you're going to have 5 minutes at a time of our Democrat colleagues asking you specific questions under oath. And you've got to be as straightforward as you can be and make sure that you understand. They're not going to ask you a question that they don't always already know an answer to. And so be
Yeah.
straightforward and, be prepared to respond. And your wife is going to be right there with you sitting there. And it's going to be a really tough time for her and for you, 5 minutes at a time. But be prepared because you'll have 5 minutes on with our Democrat colleagues and then 5 minutes with Republican colleagues, in which we'll give you an opportunity to fully respond to anything that you might not have been able to have time to respond to when our Democrat colleagues are asking those questions. But that was
Yeah.
my message is at that point, it's up to you to respond to those
Right.
alleged allegations and so forth. But that'll come in an open hearing.
Okay. One more question on a nominee, and that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been chosen to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. There has been a lot of talk about his skepticism of vaccines and about people who he has surrounded himself with who are also skeptical of vaccines. Is that important to you?
Vaccines are important to me. And I believe in them. Uh, I think we've saved millions of lives because of vaccines. I continue to think that vaccines are on the front line of defense for healthcare in the United States. I understand that there are folks out there that have questions, in part because of the speed in which some of the vaccines were developed during the time in which COVID-19 was a threat to our society. And in doing
Yeah.
so, it brought into question whether or not they had been done and whether or not there was enough safety involved in it. But here's the bottom line. I don't mind it if he wants to step in and ask questions and have reviews done. That's fine. That's okay. But I
Mhm.
don't want to lose the availability of vaccines. And from what I'm understanding and seeing most recently in press coverage last evening and this morning, while he's in the halls, which is where we get a lot of our information right now,
Yeah.
he has made it very clear that he does not intend to take out anything or to go after the polio vaccine, and that it doesn't appear as though he's going to be as aggressive on challenging vaccines as what I think some people had thought he would be, which I think
Yeah.
is a good thing. But hey, look, I'm going to give this guy a fair shot. I don't think there's anything wrong in a healthcare industry in which we're spending billions and billions of dollars to take a second look and to make everybody prove themselves again. So I'm fine with
Mhm.
that. I'm really curious to see how he approaches it as we do our individual meetings with him. I have not met with him yet. I would expect I'll be on one of the lower numbers in terms of meeting with him after he's met with the folks on the committees that are going to
Right.
be looking at his approval.
So, is there any nominee that you could see yourself voting against at
Not
this
right
point?
now.
Yeah. Okay.
Not right now. In fact, look, here's the deal. I think most of us want to be a part of this team that puts things together so that the new administration can hit the ground running.
Mhm.
And so we always start out with the president should get the benefit of the doubt on any of his nominees. I did that with Obama. I did that with Biden. I did that with President Trump the first time around. And so we always start by assuming the president should be able to choose who he wants with them. But as part of the advice and consent role that we have, and I really do believe in that, part of it is to provide the president with advice if we think that someone needs more work or needs more information. The other piece
Yeah.
on it is to provide good information and advice to the individuals as they work their way through the process about where if I ask them questions and there's things that they want to improve upon, or like, what, they need to go back and make sure that they've got everything
Right.
kind of put together for the open hearings, that they do that as well. And then
Yeah.
finally, the consent comes after we've had the open hearings and so forth. But right now, I think we want to get this team together. We want to move forward. Want to give the president the opportunity to get his team in place and really get things rolling. I
Yeah.
think that what the president's trying to do coming up with regard to defense and with regard to rebuilding the economy, getting those tax credits back in, so that we don't have a tax increase, he's on the right path. And for the
Okay.
first 100 days or so, we've got to be working as a team.
Great transition. Talking about the first 100 days, Donald Trump, the president coming in, says that he, in his first perhaps hours, is going to start with this mass deportation force. Do you agree with that? And should he deport every single undocumented person that is in the country currently?
That's not quite what I've heard him say, and that's not quite what I've heard his team members say. I think Tom Homan made it very clear that they're going to go after the criminals that shouldn't be here in the first place. And I think that's a good place to start, is going after the folks that are a danger to our society. And that's going to take a huge amount of time all by itself. That will be their focus. And the quicker we can get those bad guys out of here, the better off America is. So I have no problems with where they're going to have their priorities. But there's more to the first 100 days. And I know that you're focusing right now on trying to catch the bad guys that are in this country and either putting them in jail or deporting them. But there's another piece to this which has got to happen, and that is within the Senate and the House and the presidency right now, this trifecta, which allows us to do the reconciliation, which means by a majority vote in the Senate, majority vote in the House, and the president's signature, we can do some things that impact mandatory spending and the budget. And I think our focus is going to be on getting what could be a really big tax increase if we don't get it done, but getting that tax increase underway immediately, so that we've got about 5 or 6 months in which to do all the technical stuff on the tax plan, so that we don't have a tax increase, which otherwise would happen because the tax modifications that we did back when President Trump was first in office will expire, and that would be catastrophic to our country. In the meantime, in the first 100 days, we want to deliver a win for the president in providing him with the resources to secure the southern border. That means some construction funds. It means electronic surveillance. It means manpower around the border, so that border is definitely secure, which is one of the reasons why the president won the election. But the other piece on that is to start building on with mandatory spending, our defense base. We're in really tough shape with regard to what we've got to do to fix our spending with regard to our military. We've got a possibility, if we ever get into a major fight with one of our adversaries, it wouldn't be on just one front, it will be on 2 fronts at least. And we're not prepared for that. And so we've got to start making the changes now, so that, once again, as I said earlier, the young men and women that we put in harm's way, if we have to put them in harm's way, that they don't enter a fair fight, that we've got the best systems and enough ammunition and so forth, so that they've got the upper hand. The other side of that
Yeah.
is if we've got a really strong defense and our adversaries recognize us that way, the chances of avoiding a war go way up. And that's what we want, is to avoid the war in the first place.
Yeah. Senator, sorry I had some technical issues, but I'm back, and I want to ask you, in our limited amount of time, one of the priorities of the president has been ending birthright citizenship in the 14th Amendment. Do you support that?
I think there's a part of it where people are coming into our country to have a child so that the child has citizenship here has been a challenge. On the other hand, I think we have a constitutional issue here, because our founding fathers and the folks who have created the Constitution with the amendments to it, they thought it was very appropriate that if somebody was born in the United States, that they should have that citizenship. So I think the real issue is how the president would go about approaching it, because we do have problems that have been created because of the draw of having a child in the United States and what that means for illegal entry into the United States. I don't know how he plans on approaching it, but most certainly we have a problem that we need to address. I simply don't know how the president would plan to go about doing it without changing the Constitution.
Yeah, and very, very quickly, in our last 30 seconds, there's a lot of discussion about what the president should focus on first with the Congress next year, whether it should be taxes or a border/energy bill. Which do you think should go first?
Well, we'll begin working on the tax bill, but that's going to take us probably until through July to get it all ready to go, just because it's technically going to be very complicated and we want to do it right. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't start working on it. The other piece of it is on the defense of our country, getting the southern border under control and so forth. That is an area that I think we can work on right away. We want to deliver some items so that the American people know that we're very, very serious about it. The other piece is, let's get back to where we're actually doing things on time, get rid of these continuing resolutions. And I know right now the House of Representatives is planning on sending us a bill that would go all the way till March with a continuing resolution. I hate that
Yeah.
idea. I wish we weren't dumping that on the president that way. I wish we'd have it done right now so that the president could start out with his appropriations process for next year with a clean slate. Unfortunately, I'm afraid the House is not in agreement with us on it, so we'll have to deal with that. But we're going to work together. We're going to get things done as a team, and we're going to try to get the president's priorities out in a reasonable fashion as quickly as possible with his team in place.
Great. Senator, yes, you made an excellent point. The government is set to shut down Friday at midnight. Hopefully that does not happen. But thank you so much for your time today.
Self-inflicted.
Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Self-inflicted. We should not be doing business this way.
hmm Senator Mike Rounds, Republican of South Dakota. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you want to watch this and all of our other programs, please visit washingtonpost.com/live. I'm Leanne Caldwell. We'll see you next time.